fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Diverse in the Stars podcast, third season. All my loyal listeners, thank you for helping me on my quest to 1,000 subscribers. This is a very special episode because Marv Wolfman boards the mothership. We deep dive into his Hall of Fame career. Now come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Wolfman. Thank you so much for coming to Diverse in the Stars podcast.
Hi there.
It's an absolute honor to speak with you, sir. You're one of the great legends of comic books, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for comics and who are your earliest influences?
Well, in terms of comics, it was actually watching the old Superman TV show. And at the end of it, it said it's based on a copyrighted character. And I was at my friend's house, and we got up and we walked to the corner where there was a newsstand and bought our very first comic, which of course was Superman.
Very cool. Did you keep them? I'm sure they're worth lots of money now.
I'm sure it is, but I don't even remember the issue. Unfortunately, a lot of my books vanished over the years. So, but it was, it got me interested. And once I started to see the comics, I was totally hooked.
So do you remember which series you were regularly buying?
Superman. When I was a kid, there were very few superhero comic books out there. There was Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Blackhawks. That was it. So it was fairly easy to buy all of those. Plus, I did buy Archie's, and I did buy the other things as well. But primarily, the superhero stuff was Superman and its ancillary titles like Superboy or Action, Batman, and Wonder Woman.
What is it like for you to have gone from buying your first comic book to being nominated or actually being entered into the Hall of Fame in October of 2023 for the Harvey Hall of Fame? And you also, I believe, are an Eisner Hall of Fame member as well. So what is that like from being that first comic book buyer now being one of the great legends of the industry?
Well, a legend is a myth, and I'm actually a person, so I don't think of myself as a legend. It's incredible because I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do. My interest was to do comics, create ideas, and that's what I'm doing. And it's wonderful that somehow the stuff that I like writing, obviously there's a large audience for, and that's kept me in the business for all these years. It's been wonderful.
So being a Hall of Fame level writer, obviously you do things at that level better. That means you do things better than other writers do at their level. So what do you think, what is your understanding of comic books or character that puts you into that higher echelon of writers?
Comics, and certainly the superhero comics, are about wish fulfillment. They're about reaching for the stars, not letting things stop you. I think most of us in the business have that idea. It's the luck of something we create that nobody was expecting. But I think generally, most of the people in comics who have been in comics for, say, more than 5 years are pretty much the same quality-wise. It's just, as I say, a matter of luck that you happen to write something that fits the audience at exactly that time period. And it's incredible when that happens because you're servicing an audience that you want to show them your work. So I find that wonderful, and I love it.
Now, when you think about your own career as a writer, what do you think, what era of your writing do you think you developed the most in over the course of your career?
I think in the very beginning, I wasn't very good on, say, character stuff. And I spent a lot of time teaching myself how to create characters, how to think about characters, how to write so every character has a different voice. And I really do center on that. Those are the main things that all writers have to really learn how to deal with. And because in the beginning it was very hard for me to get work, I don't think my writing of characters was that good. So I really spent a lot of time teaching myself how to do it as best as I could.
Now, and it's probably a very complicated process, but do you think you could give us some details to the future writers on how you learned to develop characters, what process you went through to do it better?
That's a very long question, very short question, very long answer, and I'll try to keep it real short. Um, you have to, in all writing, you have to understand structure, how a story builds, what you're supposed to do with the characters. You have to learn how to write those characters and really write them so that people care about them. They don't have to be good people, but you have to care about what the character is. And you have to think about it in those terms. Think of your friends. If you're a writer, think of all the different friends you have. They all like the same stuff because that's why you're friends. But what happens is everyone has a different personality. Everyone acts differently to the same exact circumstances. Figure that out, how to put that into a story, how to have the characters in the story do the same thing. In real life, that happens. And in fictional life, it should happen because that fleshes out the characters.
Now, we're talking about liking a character. You wrote you wrote one of the most famous villains in literature, Dracula, in the Tomb of Dracula comic books. Now, obviously, he's a hardcore villain. How did you express or approach the liking of that character for your audience?
Oh, I never wanted you to like the character. Never tried to. Everything, excuse me, every single thing Dracula said in the comic in Tomb of Dracula was a lie. He lied to himself. He's a villain. He's a killer. There's no good side to him. But if you're fleshing out a character, if you're making a character feel real, you have to understand the good of the character and the bad of the character. Because to themselves, they're not evil. To themselves, they're doing what should be done. So what you want to make sure is that the characters react correctly for who they are, whether they're being good or being bad at that moment.
Now, there's a quote that I read of yours about Tomb of Dracula. If you don't mind, I'm going to read it.
Go ahead.
Okay. You said this storyline, issues 12 to 14, is when I finally figured out what this book was about. So, what was about issues 12 to 14 in Tomb of Dracula that helped you understand what the book was supposed to be about?
Got it. It's only been 50 years since I wrote that, so it's right at the tip of my tongue. That several part story, if I recall correctly, featured the death of Quincy Hawker's daughter. Once I wrote that, and this was at a time where nobody killed people, certainly not one of the heroines of the story. But once I did that, it freed me up to think about writing in different fashions because the readers really responded to it because it felt real. They'd never seen that in a comic. It's always, you fall off something, then you come right back. When she fell, I think she skewered herself. She landed on something and she died that way. It was pretty bad. And when you suddenly are freed from the restraints of the comics code in some way or another, and you write a story that has actual emotion to it, it changes the way you think of the stuff. Superhero comic books, for the most part, superhero comics are more like detective stories. You have to figure out the clues. You have to go figure out what you're doing next. You're figuring out this. What we turned Dracula into was a character-driven story, not the plot-driven story. And that was really important because that made you follow this character and watch his ups and downs and realize that he's probably lying, but you have to figure it all out. So you get involved with the story because he's no longer just a fake villain. He becomes real because he has killed someone of great importance. As time went on, everybody started doing that same sort of thing. It wasn't unique to me. It's the way books have been written forever. So we worried more about character, and I think that helped Dracula.
Now, once you realize you have the power of unpredictability with your readers, what does it allow you to do knowing that the readers now don't know if you're going to kill off a main character or what's going to happen next? What does it allow you to do as a writer, and what kind of power does that give you to keep in your writing?
One of the things you want is to involve readers. And if you just write what they expect, you're not involving them, they'll sort of doze off a little bit because they know exactly where the story is going. There's never even a question in their mind. They know what's going to happen next. But if you could start throwing in twists, if you could start making it impossible for them to know in advance, they will become more intrigued by the story. They will definitely want to read the story to see where it goes because they're not expecting whatever they've read to date. I don't know if that's clear, but it opens you up to be able to write almost anything that you really want to.
I think often in comic books, major events happen at milestone issues like 50, 100, things of that nature. When you're writing, is that something you think about? Like, I have to do this for this milestone or something like that, or do you just allow the story to tell itself?
It's a combination of both because you want to make those special issues, and an anniversary allows you to do something like that. But you want to have it plotted into your story correctly. With Tomb of Dracula, I actually plotted the book 3 years ahead of schedule. So I knew exactly where the character was going, where all the characters were going. And I think it's important that you just surprise the readers, get them involved, make them want to know what's going on, make it so that they cannot predict where it's going, so they are more intrigued.
Now, there's a great moment in issue 12. I know it's going back a bit, but
I don't remember what issue 12 is.
Right. Well, it's one of the earlier issues of Blade, which I know you co-created. And in the issue, Dracula refers to Blade as being a monster. So it got me thinking, if to Dracula, Blade is a monster, what then is Dracula in his mind?
Dracula is the one who kills monsters.
So what to him is a monster?
Someone who does. I think he sees Blade as a monster and other people as monsters because they do not go against him. They are an impediment to what he wants to do. They're evil, they're monsters, they're everything that's wrong with the world, and why Dracula is right and why Dracula is going to succeed in the long run because he has the truth on his side.
Now, one of the coolest things in comics history is that you are the creator of Blade. And everyone knows Blade from Marvel, who the Blade movie is what basically launched the Marvel movie franchise for the most part. It's what came from Blade. So when you have created a character like Blade, how do you feel about how different mediums translate the character?
I think you have to be very honest to yourself when you start doing anything creative. When you're writing comics, you know up front that other people can write the same books because it's the company owns the characters. So I go out of my way not to get involved with people who not to get involved with stories that I don't write in the same way. They can do it because I wrote Superman. I didn't create Superman. I wrote Batman. I didn't create Batman. So why is it okay for me to do that and not someone else? If they have the right to do a story with Blade, they have that right. The same way I have the right to do Superman if that's permitted by the people who wrote it. So if you don't take that as precious, you take your own work as precious and something that you work hard on, but you can't say, nobody can touch my book. I'm the only one who can write this, because you're doing the same thing with other books. And it's only correct to allow them to have the same freedom that you do.
Now, Blade is someone who the rumor is coming back in the world of Marvel Cinematic Universe, just like when Wesley Snipes played him in the late 90s. Or does people come ask you as the creator of how to interpret a character? Do they ever discuss it with you?
They generally don't do that because the movie divisions of companies are not the same as the comic book divisions of companies. So, they don't think of those things, not just for Blade or for me or for anyone else. It's for everybody. That's the movie divisions do what they feel is best, and they don't really seek out the creators in many ways, because a lot of creators would prevent them from doing the very things that make the movie great
Hmm.
because they want it exactly the way they created it.
Hmm.
And again, just the same way I made changes in Superman or I made changes in Batman or any of the others, they have the right to do the same. So I don't get excited or angry about any of that.
Well, one thing that was very cool is that you did appear in the Arrowverse Crisis on Infinite Earths storyline as a nut, and I think that was a very cool thing they did.
Yeah, Mark Guggenheim set that up, and he was the showrunner for those. And that was great. I thought that was just a wonderful, wonderful thank you, and I loved it.
Now, one issue that you wrote recently is What If Dark, The Tomb of Dracula, which was a great issue you wrote a few months back. How does writing a what if story allow you to explore different parts of the characters? How does it allow you to maybe consider things that you hadn't done the first time around?
Well, I think I would not have done a Dracula if they asked me to do a new Tomb of Dracula story. I would not be interested in doing that. I did the book I wanted to do. It's no longer something that is mine. It can go to the other people, to the other writers. But if you're doing a what if, you can go off in any way possible,
Hmm.
and you could do things that you think would be really cool, but you would never have been able to do in the regular run of the comics. So I got a chance to look at what I had done, find a place that a what if story would work, and then had a great deal of fun writing it.
Like I said, it was just a really fun comic. It was a great to revisit the Tomb of Dracula story. So thank you so much for doing that one. I do want to ask you about another comic book that you wrote, another character that you created that means a lot to me. You wrote my first ever Batman comic book that I've ever read, Batman 436, which was the Batman Year 3 comic book. Which, like I said, that's the one that basically when I first started buying comic books regularly, that's the one that started me, was that issue.
Ah,
So
cool.
thank you so much.
My
Uh,
pleasure.
and in it, you created the character of Tim Drake, who's one of my favorite characters in comic books. So when you're creating Tim Drake, what was some of the discussions you had, if you remember, with the publishing? What did they tell you to do or not to do in creating the third Robin?
They came to me and just said, "Can you create a new Robin for us?" That was all that they said because Batman needed a Robin, and my thought was Batman needed a Robin, otherwise he was going crazy. He was starting to get more violent. He was starting to get angry, and he can't be a good crime fighter if his mind is taken up with all this other nonsense. So my view was have a very smart kid who wanted to be Robin because he felt that Batman needed a Robin. And he was smart. He figured out who Dick Grayson was. He figured out who Batman was. He figured out all this stuff. And it made him someone who cared about Batman. It made him someone who really was so good, was so perfect for this that Batman couldn't say no to him finally. Batman was not looking for a partner again.
Hmm.
He had one of them leave him, Dick Grayson, and one of them died with Jason Todd. But Tim was something special. And he realized that Tim would help him the same way Tim knew that he could help Batman.
I think one thing that's very interesting as far as character development goes, with Dick Grayson, he's created by tragedy just like Batman is. Jason Todd, on some level, was created by tragedy as being like a street kid who experienced loss. Tim Drake was not created through tragedy. So you're thinking about his characterization. How did that aspect change how you approached him as a character?
In a way, Tim's origin does come from uh, something bad, some problem, because he watched Dick Grayson's parents be killed,
Hmm.
and that it's so rooted in his mind that the, he kept at it. He kept searching. He kept researching who these people were,
Hmm.
and that's how he figured it all out. But that came from tragedy. But he was going to make sure that Batman didn't suffer.
And I think another thing that's kind of interesting too is that unlike some characters in history of comic books, you didn't rush Tim Drake completely into the full-time Robin role. It was kind of like this was like a gradual build over many issues. So how important was it to kind of allow him to grow into the role versus some characters like the original Robin, which kind of just pops up in the comic book, and it's like, hey, now he has Robin.
The idea is Tim has to earn the right to be who he becomes. You can't do that in one issue. You have to take the time. You have to take the time to let the readers who probably didn't want Batman to have a kid partner again, to have them come around to what you're doing, to show them how good Tim was, to show him how special he was. So you take the time to develop him, and that's only going to make him stronger later on.
And like I said, it must be fantastic because Tim Drake, I think for a lot of people, especially my generation, find him to be the best Robin. I think the best well-rounded Robin, the most interesting Robin, and it must feel good to know that you wrote probably the best version of that character.
It astonishes me because, as I say, to me it's so natural, and how to do this is just, of course, this is the way you do it. And I never thought that readers would either love, hate, or whatever Tim, but I knew that I was going to try and make him a character that people would like. And thank God it did. You can't tell for sure. Every writer out there has done stories that they utterly love, but nobody else loves. And they do stories that everybody loves but you. You yourself don't like the story. It didn't work out. So when something works out, to me, it's always a surprise, and I thank God for that.
If you feel comfortable telling me, can you tell me which ones those are for you? The ones that you know are your favorite, but might not have been well liked, and the ones that you were not your favorite, you know, are loved by everybody.
I would have to take so much time to remember some of that stuff. You know,
No
it's
worries.
been so many years.
So I'm gonna pronounce the name wrong, so feel free to correct me. You worked with on Batman, one of my favorite artists in Jim Aparo. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, Jim Aparo.
Aparo. What was he like to work with?
Jim was a brilliant artist. He almost never came into the office, so I really didn't know him well outside of giving him scripts. But I loved his art. I mean, he did beautiful stuff at Charlton, and then later on Batman and the Outsiders, and he did tons of great stuff. And he told a beautiful story.
If my memory is right, I think the work that I remember the most is the Aquaman covers. He did some beautiful Aquaman work.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. What can you say? I love working with him. I wish I could have done it more. But as I say, he also rarely came into the office because he worked at home and sent the pages in.
As a writer, because obviously comic books, unlike any other writing medium, is a team effort. There's a writer and there's an artist. How does it impact you as a writer to know that your artist is at the level of a Jim Aparo?
If you're working with a great artist, your book is going to be that much better.
Hmm.
That's what it is. When you work with someone like a Jim Aparo or George Perez or Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, you know every little point of imagination that's in your head, that artist can convey, that artist can put on paper, and not everybody can. So you just are so thankful when you can team up with a writer, with an artist who thinks the same way you do, who understands the characters the same way you do, and wants to tell the same type of story.
Hmm. I think I like that you mentioned George Perez. I think that George Perez handled scale and especially team books better than almost any other artist I've ever seen. What does that allow as well, knowing that as much as you want to put on the page, you'll get on that page. You know, he will do it correctly for you. Does it allow you to just kind of open the floodgates of your creativity?
It's what I said just a minute ago. When you're working with an artist like George, you know that anything you can think of, he's going to take and be able to do it and come up with a way of doing it better. You've given him the idea, now he could play with it and make it visual and make sure that it's visual. And not every artist can do that. They can draw beautiful pictures, but they don't always add to the story. He did.
Now, it's probably debatable which storyline of yours is the most famous. There's a lot of ones to go to, but I think for a lot of people, Crisis on Infinite Earths is the most famous Marv Wolfman storyline, I think. I don't know. Some people may disagree with me, but that's what I'm going to go with. Do you have some time to talk about it?
Go ahead.
All right, cool. So, like I said, the most famous storylines is Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was recently turned into an animated film, which I'm looking forward to seeing, and also been translated to television in the Arrowverse as well. Why do you think that the series Crisis on Infinite Earth is still having the impact, given that in many ways it was part of the time period and of the age when they were trying to revamp their industry or their company, DC?
I think nobody had ever done anything like Crisis before. It was huge on a scale that we had never tried to do. Um, to reiterate your question from previously, I knew George could draw that, and he could draw every single thought I had on how to make this book cosmic beyond anything we've seen before. I think it really surprised readers when we killed Supergirl and Flash because they never expected that DC would do that. I think it surprised readers when we found all these secondary characters they didn't even know about, and suddenly they fell in love with. Um, it was the right book at the right time, and Ego demands my saying, George and I did a good job with it. We plotted a great story. He drew a great story. I wrote a great story.
Now, as you mentioned, you killed Barry Allen and you killed Supergirl in that storyline, which once again, some of the most famous issues ever. Actually, the Death of Barry Allen issue is the one I have autographed by you. So it's on my wall behind me somewhere. If you the stars are there, but if the stars weren't there, you'd see the issue that you signed for me, which was fantastic. Thank you so much. Um,
My pleasure.
how early into your plotting of Crisis on Infinite Earths did you know you were going to kill the Flash and you knew you were going to kill Supergirl?
We created a death list of what characters I wanted, we wanted, DC wanted to put out there. Obviously, it was very secret. And both of them were on the list from day one. In the case of Supergirl, my feeling was we were trying to revamp Superman as the last survivor of Krypton. He can't be the last survivor of Krypton if there's Supergirl. He can't be the last survivor of Krypton if there's the bottom city of Kandor. To make him the unique superhero, to make him the Superman the way the character should be, he couldn't have 100 people just like him. I like Supergirl. I figured that maybe several years down the line, we could come up with a new one, or we can have Kara land on Earth then, but not in the beginning, not to start off. Let's start off with Superman unencumbered by other superheroes. So that was important. Flash was something the company, the publisher and the company asked me to put in. So that wasn't mine, but we tried to do the best job we could by making him the focus of so much of the Crisis book. Even though he doesn't appear a lot, your mind is never far away from him.
It's amazing that they wanted him killed because he's such a iconic character, Barry. Surprised they wanted to do that. What was your reaction when they told you they wanted that character killed?
Well, I wasn't sure that was a good idea, to be honest. And if you notice, Flash appears as sort of like a ghost for the first batch of issues. That's because I wanted to give time to see if they changed their mind. But I think by doing it, by actually making it, building up to that death, we not only surprised the readers, but it was clearly right in front of them because we showed Barry dead, constantly appearing. So again, it's that thing of put it out there and get the readers going, what's going on here? Why is he this? Why is he that? Get them involved with the story. And I think it worked out really well because Wally West has become most people's favorite Flash.
Yeah. I will agree. I prefer Wally over Barry. But at the same time, I grew up buying comics in the late 80s, early 90s, and Wally West was my Flash. So he definitely became my favorite. As the writer, is there a risk in killing off fan favorite character? Like, what are you concerned that you'd get like these angry letters like, "How dare you kill off Barry Allen? This is your fault."
We actually received some death threats,
Oh,
which we call the FBI on.
oh
Um,
wow.
uh, you worry about that, but you can't worry too much because, first of all, we're not killing anybody. They're line drawings. They're not real. Uh, they're fictional characters that are drawn. So I never thought of it as someone's dead.
Yeah.
It's because they were never alive. Um, I wasn't worried about that. I was worried about the story.
Hmm.
And Flash has such resonance with the readers that to build up to his death and then to actually see it through really made the readers both angry and still loving the story because I got so many letters saying I was the biggest Flash fan, but that was an incredible way he died. Thank you.
I think the one way you know how impactful that death was that even in the world of comic books, Barry stayed dead a long time. I mean, other than maybe Jason Todd's death, actually longer than Jason Todd was dead.
Much longer.
Yeah, he was actually Barry Allen may be the longest dead character of a superhero that's ever had stayed in DC or
Probably.
any major company. So what like how does it feel to know you had that level of impact that people like that many years people are still saying this character's death must stay because that was too important of a thing just to let go.
I'm thrilled when the readers take such care and love for the characters that they think about this to the same degree that I would think about it in the writing of the story. Um, all of it always makes you feel good that you realize that the thoughts and the ideas that you have resonate with others and they really do like it. Um, and as more time passes, people do come up to me at conventions and say, I hated you, but that was a great ending. You made him a hero. That was a heroic ending for the character because he does everything to save the universe. And thank you for doing that. And that's such a great feeling. That means the decisions we made worked.
I think one of the most impressive things that you accomplished with Crisis on Infinite Earths that you like you said you balanced so many characters into one storyline, especially secondary characters. And one character that I think did come out really good in that series was Firestorm, who's one of my favorite all-time characters.
He was
So
fun.
he's one of yours too?
Huh?
Did you say he's one of yours as well, Firestorm?
Well, I know. I find him a fun character.
Yeah.
I like writing him an awful lot. Jerry Conway created him and did a great job.
So how did you balance the storylines of that many characters without losing the thread of each one? So from beginning to end, they all kind of resolved the way you wanted them to.
One of the first things we said during this interview, what I said was, you new writers have to understand structure, and that's something I've worked really hard on. So I spend a lot of time building the the structure of a story like Crisis long before I wrote it. It was several years, in fact. It's the longest gestation period I've ever had with a series. But it was so important. I had to take the time to make sure everything fit correctly. And by taking the time, nothing would feel rushed. Nothing would feel that it came out of nowhere. Because we knew what the story was, we could plant Flash in the beginning as a ghost, as a sort of a corpse, and knowing exactly where it was going along the way.
Was there a character that when you started either ended up with a larger or smaller role than you originally intended because of how the story played out with them?
I think the new characters we introduced, Harbinger, Pariah, and the Monitor and the Anti-Monitor, uh, probably appeared a little bit more than I would have thought immediately. But they became really good characters. So, but otherwise, I didn't make changes from my original outline unless the story required it. That it said, I need to add something here because this isn't linking in with this. As you write, you are making changes along the way, no matter how tight your original plot was.
Now, since Crisis on Infinite Earths, there's been a lot of event comic books. I think DC decided every year to do like an event from that point forward. What do you think works with Crisis on Infinite Earths that might not have worked in some other events? Like, was it that you managed to capture in that series that might be missed in some others? Without getting specific.
Crisis was created originally because the DC books weren't selling that well. And the idea was to show the Marvel readers who them, if you go back long enough, you remember they call themselves Marvel zombies. They would never even look at a DC book. So my goal, my task was to come up with a way to draw the Marvel readers in, to make them look at it and to realize how good the DC characters were. And it's important. That was what was important to me. And that's what I played towards. The fact that I was trying to, that there was a reason the book, DC sales were down, people weren't trying to do, there was an actual reason to do something big and dramatic and something that readers had never seen before. But again, the important thing is there was a reason we had to do this that made sense. It was to help DC sales. Very often, because of the success of that, a lot of follow-up events were, well, Crisis sold well, so let's just do a book where everybody teams up.
Yeah.
That's not enough of a reason. You have to have a really good reason you are doing this story. It's very big, and it has to make sense that you're doing this for a purpose. And if it's just thrown out there for sales, that's not enough of a purpose. You have to make sure it works correctly, and then you have to make sure the story is good.
So, having your long career, what is next for you? What do you want to be next for you in the world of comic book writing?
I'm writing, well, besides writing some, I'm doing a Christmas story for one. I did Marvel asked me to do some more stuff for them. But the big thing I'm doing, those are all short stories. The big thing is a graphic novel, an all original graphic novel, all age group, and it's science fiction. And I'm working on the script for that right now. I'm 115 pages into it so far.
Can you give us any hints about it?
It's a science fiction for all ages.
Is it using original characters or characters that we recognize?
Totally original characters. It's all mine.
For which company is this for? Or is this for your own company?
No, it's for a company, but I don't know if they want me to announce anything yet, so I'm not going to.
Fair enough. When you are able to talk about it, can you come back on and talk about it?
Sure. It may take a while.
There's absolutely no worries. But like I said, I think the great thing is that you've written so many great storylines. I kind of feel like we left out a lot of storylines that are worth talking about, but I always want to appreciate the time that you did give me on the ones we did discuss, and thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure.
Have a good night.
You too. Take care.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Traversing Stars podcast. Please help me battle the algorithms by liking and subscribing. Be sure to return for the next episode when Tom DeFalco boards the mothership. We discuss Maximum Carnage and the Amazing Spider-Man. Until next voyage, travel on.